You pick up your phone without deciding to. Not because you want to waste time, but because, for a moment, doing nothing feels safer than starting. You tell yourself, it's just a short break, 5 minutes to breathe. But when you look up, time is gone, and the heaviness is still there. What hurts isn't the scrolling. It's the quiet thought that follows. Why do I keep doing this? You feel behind. You feel disappointed in yourself. And somehow, the phone ends up in your hand again. If this keeps happening to you, it doesn't mean you're lazy. It means there's something you're avoiding. Not a task, but a feeling. In this video, you're not going to hear about discipline hacks or quitting your phone. You're going to understand what scrolling is protecting you from and how to finally break the pattern without fighting yourself. Because once you see what's really happening, you won't look at that moment the same way again. The moment you call yourself lazy, the conversation is already over. Because laziness sounds like a character flaw. And when you believe something is wrong with who you are, you stop looking at what is actually happening. Here's the truth. Most people never slow down enough to notice. Lazy behavior is almost always misunderstood behavior, especially when it shows up as scrolling. Think about it. You don't scroll when something feels easy, clear, and safe to begin. You scroll when starting feels heavy, when your mind is full, when the outcome is uncertain, when there's a quiet pressure to do it right. Labeling that moment as laziness feels logical, but it's inaccurate. What you're really seeing is avoidance, not of work, but of discomfort. And discomfort isn't weakness, it's a signal. When you believe you're lazy, you try to fix yourself with force, more discipline, more rules, more guilt. And every time that fails, the shame gets louder. But when you understand that this pattern is protective, something changes. Your brain isn't sabotaging you. It's shielding you from a feeling it doesn't know how to sit with yet. That's why productivity advice often backfires. It treats the symptom instead of the reason. It tells you to push harder when what's missing is clarity and emotional safety. Notice what usually comes right before the urge to scroll. Not the phone, the moment, the pause, the slight tension in your chest, the thought you don't want to finish. Scrolling steps in at that exact point because it works. It lowers the pressure instantly. No decisions, no risk, no evaluation of your ability. And if you keep calling that laziness, you'll keep fighting yourself instead of understanding the pattern. Because once you remove the label, you can finally ask a better question. Not, what's wrong with me? But, what am I protecting myself from right now? That question changes everything. The screen isn't distracting you. It's soothing you. That's why it feels almost magnetic in certain moments. Not when you're relaxed. Not when things feel clear. But right before you're about to begin something that matters. Your brain reads that moment as unstable. There's uncertainty, expectation, a quiet fear of doing it wrong or not doing enough. So your system looks for relief, fast, reliable relief, and the screen delivers it perfectly. Scrolling asks nothing from you. You don't have to decide. You don't have to be good. You don't have to risk finding out where your limits are. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts soften. For a moment, the pressure disappears, and your brain learns something important. This works. That's why this habit feels unconscious. It's not a lack of awareness. It's a learned response to discomfort. Each time scrolling lowers the tension, your nervous system reinforces the loop. Discomfort appears. Escape follows. Relief arrives. But here's the cost most people don't notice. The screen doesn't teach you how to stay with discomfort. It teaches you how to leave it. So the next time that feeling shows up, it feels stronger, more urgent, harder to tolerate. Not because the task got bigger, but because your capacity to remain present with difficulty quietly shrank. That's why you can scroll for an hour and still feel tired. You didn't rest. You paused the signal without resolving it. When you put the phone down, the task is still waiting, now layered with guilt, with lost time, with the familiar thought, why do I keep doing this? But notice something important. In those moments, you're not choosing distraction. You're choosing regulation. You're choosing the fastest way your brain knows to feel okay again. That's why forcing yourself to just stop rarely works. It ignores the function the screen is serving. The phone isn't your enemy. It's your nervous system's shortcut, used when it doesn't feel safe to stay. And once you understand that, you stop fighting the behavior. You start listening to the moment that triggers it. Because the real question was never about the screen. It's about what your system is trying to calm right before you disappear into it. Your child isn't avoiding effort. They're avoiding a moment that feels emotionally unsafe. What looks like resistance on the outside is often self-protection on the inside, not from work, but from what the work might say about them. When a task carries the risk of failure, comparison, or disappointment, it doesn't just ask for time. It asks for identity. What if I try and still can't do it? What if this proves I'm not as capable as everyone thinks? For a developing mind, that question can feel overwhelming. So the avoidance begins long before the assignment starts. It begins at the edge of self-doubt, at the moment where effort could turn into evidence of limits, of mistakes, of not being enough. The screen becomes a refuge right there, not because it's fun, but because it postpones that verdict. As long as your child doesn't begin, the outcome remains unknown, and unknown feels safer than confirmed failure. This is why telling them to just start often backfires. Starting doesn't feel like a neutral action. It feels like stepping into judgment, especially for children who care deeply, who are sensitive, or who have learned to tie their worth to performance. Scrolling isn't laziness. It's a pause button on fear. Fear of disappointing you. Fear of disappointing themselves. Fear of discovering that trying doesn't guarantee success. From the outside, it looks like indifference. From the inside, it feels like pressure with nowhere to put it. And when that pressure has no outlet, no language, no reassurance, no safe way to fail, the nervous system looks for escape. The screen offers it instantly. This matters because if you treat the behavior as defiance or apathy, you end up pushing against fear with force. And fear doesn't dissolve under pressure. It hides. But when you recognize what your child is actually avoiding, your role changes. You stop trying to control the behavior and start protecting the relationship. You shift from asking, "Why won't you do it?" to quietly noticing what feels risky here. Because most children don't avoid work, they feel safe doing. They avoid the moment where effort might collide with their sense of self. And the screen is just where they go to keep that collision from happening. At this point, it's tempting to tighten control. Limit the screen harder. Raise your voice. Add consequences. That reaction is understandable. But control feels effective only on the surface, because control changes behavior temporarily. Capability changes it sustainably. Here's the shift that matters. Your child doesn't need more pressure to comply. They need more capacity to cope. When a child lacks emotional capacity to tolerate uncertainty, effort, or the possibility of failure, no amount of rules will make starting feel safe. Rules may force movement, but they don't build resilience. And once the pressure is gone, the avoidance returns. This is where many parents feel stuck. If you don't control, things fall apart. If you do control, you become the enemy. But capability grows in a different environment. An environment where effort is separated from worth. Where mistakes don't trigger disappointment. Where starting small is still considered starting. This doesn't mean removing expectations. It means changing what the expectation is actually about. Instead of demanding completion, you emphasize engagement. Instead of focusing on outcomes, you notice attempts. Instead of asking, "Did you finish?" you ask, "What part felt hardest to begin?" That shift sends a quiet but powerful message. You are allowed to struggle without losing safety. And when safety is present, the nervous system stops looking for escape. This is uncomfortable at first, especially if you were raised to believe that discipline creates strength. But strength doesn't come from being controlled. It comes from learning you can stay present even when things feel hard. When your child senses that you are not monitoring them to catch failure, but supporting them to build capacity, something changes. They don't need the screen as much, not because it's forbidden, but because avoidance no longer feels necessary. You're not lowering the bar, you're widening the bridge, and capability grows there, quietly, gradually, and far more reliably than control ever could. If you take one thing from this, let it be this: you are not trying to raise a child who is perfectly focused. You are raising a child who knows how to stay present when things feel uncomfortable. That is a different identity. You are becoming the kind of parent who builds capacity, not compliance. The kind who understands that avoidance is a signal, not a flaw. The kind who knows that progress doesn't come from force, but from safety and repetition. And your child is becoming someone who learns, slowly, that they can begin even when they don't feel ready. That effort doesn't threaten their worth. That discomfort is survivable. This change won't look dramatic. It won't happen in one conversation or one perfect week. It will show up in small moments, in calmer responses, in shorter escapes, in attempts that used to never happen. Consistency matters more than perfection here. You don't need to do this right every time. You just need to return to it. So here's the only action I want you to take after this video. The next time your child reaches for a screen to avoid something, don't correct the behavior. Ask one calm question that points to capacity, not control. And then listen. That single shift, repeated, changes everything over time. If this helped you see your child, or yourself, a little more clearly, stay with this work. Reflect on it, apply it, and when you're ready, continue learning how small, intentional shifts create real change.